How are you getting over this imposter syndrome? I've never done this before. What if it goes wrong? What if people are like, I'm not going to follow along with you or pay you for anything because you didn't get to 100K?
What I was more focused on was helping people normalize failure. And I thought, well, if that's helpful for me, maybe it would be helpful for somebody else to see this too. It did feel very vulnerable, I will have to admit, but the response that I got was people were so grateful to have like a real look behind the scenes that's what just kept moving me forward through it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Art of Online Business podcast. Next to me on screen is none other than Neill Williams, a guest that I have so much respect for. She has a bio here and I'll read it, but first I have to tell you that when I started working in like a high level mastermind / group coaching program for established online course creators, I knew nothing about coaching and the goodness and greatness and wonderfulness that it is until I saw Neill Williams in action. She's a master certified coach, an entrepreneur, a mom and wife. She helps busy female entrepreneurs achieve more in less time with a science-backed approach to productivity and performance for themselves and their teams. And you got to know, as you're listening to this episode, this is one that you should scrub back and listen to certain parts over and over again, because I've seen Neill help, I don't even know how many. It at least has to be 50 something entrepreneurs through their stuff and see tangible results in their business because of their sessions with her. And she is the one who turned me on to coaching. Like, I didn't know that there was a difference between consulting and coaching until I observed her and then read books that she recommended. And I can say personally, just being an observer of the conversations that this lady is capable of having has helped me see and reflect on myself and grow so much as a online business owner. An intro can't even do her justice. She is the host of the Success Genius podcast, where science meets entrepreneurial success to help people understand how to function well so that they can achieve all the things that they had wanted to in business. And in this episode, you're going to get to know her more and how she built her business, how she's gone through a very intriguing pivot from teaching people really well about Facebook ads and funnels to a business that's focused a lot more on productivity and performance. She's gone back to her roots. And Neill, I can't wait for this episode to unfold. I'm experiencing it as a listener is experiencing it, and I'm so honored to have you as a guest. Thank you for being here.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was quite the intro. Thank you, QUÄY.jo. Joe, good
It's
to
from
see
the
you.
heart.
Yeah. It's so fun because we haven't actually seen each other, I think, for almost 2 years, right? We saw each other in person in San Diego last time. Yes. At a mastermind where we were coaching a bunch of high-level entrepreneurs, which was super fun. So thank you for letting me be here. I was super honored to be here, and I can't wait for our conversation.
Yay. Well, I mean, the conversation's starting right now. So I guess in my mind, Neill, when I started this series, I did shift it from just getting to know you to really wanting to see, like, what has it been like to build, at least in my recent memory, you've built two businesses. And I want to know more about the second one, but the first one was already blowing me away. Sincerely, I manage Facebook ads, and yet I heard some of what you're doing in, I believe, two different podcast episodes, and I was like, geez, all right, a little bit of positive jealousy going on, go Neill, but dang, I would like to be doing what you're like, having that kind of. So how did you build that business up, really? And then I really want to know later in the episode, like, what happened as you shifted to this business that you're currently running? Where do you want to start?
So I think, yeah, last time we met, I was doing a few programs. One was called 100K Funnel, and one was really helping coaches learn how to do Facebook ads for themselves. The coaches I was working with specifically didn't necessarily have the businesses at the level where you would hire a QUÄY.jo and implement a QUÄY.jo into your business to do your ads for you. And so they were kind of bootstrapping, figuring out how to do it on their own, which is what I did. And I just practice a lot. I think this is really like you think about like a winning strategy. I think what it is, I'm really stubborn and I'm willing to practice and experiment with something long enough to achieve whatever it is that I want to achieve. So I mean, I was that weirdo girl who started Facebook ads like within the first few months of her business. Like I started experimenting with them. I knew of Rick. I followed all of the stuff that he talked about at the time. And I just kept trying things and trying things and trying things. And even though it looks, I think from the outside, people thought, oh, overnight success, right? Like the one of the things that was super cool is the last funnel that I built before the one that I have currently running. I was like, all right, I'm going to see how fast I can get this thing to 100K because I want to show people that this is actually possible. And so I think it was like 93 days. We took it from 0 to 100K in 93 days. And even that blew my mind. But the thing that people don't see is all the work that I did behind the scenes for the years prior to that, right? Where I was learning like what works, what doesn't work, how do I experiment, how do I scale ads, how do I like all that stuff that you do. So people saw that success, and then naturally what happens when people see that success? They're like, can you teach me how to do it too? Right? So that's how I ended up like my business ended up going from productivity towards this more marketing angle where I was helping people set up funnels and ads inside of their businesses.
Okay, take us right back to the time when you were building that funnel to 100K. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were also sharing this journey publicly too, right? So what's going through your mind before it hit 10K and you've already announced to the world that you're going to 100 and you're doing like what's going through your mind? And give us like a peek behind the scenes of like what kind of hours were you pulling off and things you were doing to.
Yeah, so I've also been someone who's never really overworked in my business, and that's a whole nother like we can go down that whole rabbit hole if we want to. That was something that I came from the corporate world where I overworked it like a lot, and I just when I started my business, I just made that promise to myself that I would never do that. So I wasn't putting in a ton of hours. I had like a block of time on my schedule every week, and that was to pull the data from my ads and my funnel to look at it and figure out what is the test I'm going to do this week to make it work better. Like literally, that's what I did. And so I went on to Instagram and I was like, okay, I'm going to actually show the behind the scenes of everything that it takes for me to get from 0 to 100K. And what I'm really good at is very quick execution. So like I don't let any grass grow under my feet. I'm just like I quickly implement. And that's why I think it only took me 93 days. If you look at all the tests that I did in that 93 days, I think I'm trying to remember now, it was somewhere around 50 to 60 different tests. So I was doing multiple tests per week. And that is really how I ended up optimizing it so fast. And I shared every week, I did something called a funnel fail Friday, where I shared my fails in the funnel. So people could actually see and normalize in their brain what it actually takes to get a funnel up and running the way that mine ended up running.
That is Funnel Fail Friday. Reminds me of maybe you know the author. He wrote a book called The Slight Edge. This isn't a new one. It must have come out before 2008 because that's when I read it. And it basically is talking about this concept of failing forward and how if you continue to fail forward, it's like a hockey stick logarithmic curve going upward. And the concept was the slight edge was just this ability to embrace failure and fail forward on the way to success. And it was like, why in a short period of time, two people, they'll look externally the same, but then over a longer period of time, one person is up here and the other person is, and it's this concept of improving a little bit, failing forward. And you said Funnel Fail Friday. So you're sharing this publicly.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, here's what happened, here's what didn't work, here's the money that we made, here's the ad money that we spent. Like I tried to provide as many details as I could so that people would see that it's totally possible. You just have to be willing to do what it takes to make it possible.
Sounds good, but mindset coach, how are you getting over this imposter syndrome? I've never done this before. What if it goes wrong? What if people are like, I'm not going to follow along with you or pay you for anything because you didn't get to 100K? Like, did you even have those thoughts? What was going on there?
I don't even remember having those thoughts, honestly. I mean, maybe they did pop in, but what I was more focused on was helping people normalize failure. That was like my whole thing that I wanted to do for myself for that year personally was to normalize failure for myself. And I thought, well, if that's helpful for me, maybe it would be helpful for somebody else to see this too. And so that's really why I shared it. At times it did felt very vulnerable, I will have to admit. And like, but the response that I got was people were so grateful to have like a real look behind the scenes that that's what just kept moving me forward through it. So yeah, it was an interesting experience.
So spoiler alert, you made it to 100K, yeah?
I did. Yeah.
What did your team look like as you achieved this?
So I've always only had one other person who works for me, and her name is Kelly. Anybody who knows me or knows our business has probably been touched by Kelly in some way. She is phenomenal. Everyone wants to hire her. And I don't say that like in jest. Like people are like, she is amazing. Is she looking to be hired? Right? So it was just Kelly and I. Really, that was it. I was at the time I was doing my own ads. I was doing all my copy and my marketing and all of that. And yeah, it was just the two of us.
I might be missing something, but just the two of you, you're running your podcast, producing it, all that. You also have the programs that you're selling. If you were you just marketing to your list periodically, or were you going through like a launch season? But then also you had social media and you had all the business behind the scenes operation things. And you're also doing this experiment, if you will. The first time you've ever done it, funnel, 100K funnel. All that with just you and one team member it out.
And I was working at the time 25 hours. She works probably, and that was with all the so I also had my book of private clients. So a lot of that 25 hours was coaching sessions with my private clients. And Kelly works maybe 10 hours a week for me. I know.
So coaching with your private clients was in there too, delivering on one-on-one coaching within 24. No wonder you switched also to a productivity and performance business. Shoot, I feel like, can you just drop down like your one-on-one coaching link below and I'll sign up first so you can help me get things in order. Wow.
Yeah. So it's that, like that response that I hear from you is one of the reasons why I pivoted back to productivity and performance, because I don't think there's anything special about me except that I've built the skill of really effective, efficient execution. And I think that's the thing, right? That made it it was not easy, but it was something that felt attainable for me to do, creating that funnel. I now have a new funnel. I have a book out. Like that.
Would you like to have a Meta Ads Manager look at your ads and coach you step by step so you can make them work better? Well, that's me, and I can do that with you. Over the course of 28 days, you'll get unlimited access to me so that you can learn how to make your ads perform the way you hoped so that your business can bring in lots more leads. Or if you're running direct to sales kind of ads, like a self-liquidating offer funnel, it can be more profitable. Go down to the description below and book a call with me now.
The level that we can execute inside our business makes us really able to pivot, to create new content, to do all the things that we need to do pretty effectively. But it's always been so very important to me that we never get in this place where we feel like we're tied to our computers, where the business is just going to crash if somebody goes on vacation, or we feel burnt out. Like if that were to happen, I would just shut my business down. It just wouldn't exist.
Okay. In a moment, because I think we've reached the highlight of this first business. And if the listener isn't intrigued why you have a different business now, I know I am, and I want to know like what happened in between. But this would be a good natural spot because to talk about your book, How to Thrive on a 10-Hour Work Week, because I guess I just kind of jokingly requested a strategy call with you about like whipping my week into order and getting more results out of my business in a smaller period of work time. But you wrote a book about that.
Yeah, I did. And it really is like my whole process and kind of like my background story of being that. I mean, I was a partner in a firm. I'm an actuary by training, which you can Google it. Yeah, I'm like the science numbers nerd girl.
But an actuary, we're talking about calculating for insurance companies all the factors about how long it takes people to die, right? And risk.
Yeah, I wasn't in the insurance industry because I fundamentally disagree with that industry. That's a whole different world, but I was in the retirement and risk world. So, similar kinds of things. Anyways, modeling and risk and all that. Yes. So I was in that world, and I was a new mom, and I felt like I wasn't going to be able to survive working these like 60, 80-hour weeks and being a mom the way that I wanted to be. So what I did is I figured out how to scale back my work week to 30 hours. And that's really like that whole process is the thing that then allowed me to go into business. And I think it's the reason why I was this as successful as quickly as I was, because I learned really quickly how to execute and how to be really effective, and I didn't stall out. I think a lot of new entrepreneurs we kind of like get stuck and we're like, we're not sure what we're doing. We're just like putting in some time, but it's not really creating any results, that kind of thing.
Wow. So 4 sentences about your book, though I'm kinda getting this now, and I'm like, "Shoot, I wish I would've known you had a book before, like, I look at this, because now I need to go to Amazon and get this thing to my house quicker."
No, you don't need to go to Amazon. I'll send it to you.
I'm in Mexico. Maybe it's better if I go to Amazon.
It's fine.
Side note, when you said you were an actuary, it reminded me of a book that I had read that really helped me with perspective, and it was called Counting the Cost, I think. It was by a guy who was a hospice person. Have you heard of that one?
No, counting the costs. I have not.
I think it might be solidly in the personal finance niche, but from the perspective of somebody who spent a lot of time with people, well, hospice providers, so people who were at the ends of their life. I had never heard before I read that. So many intriguing things around personal finance, but also lining it up with the goals that you have in your life and the time that you get to spend with your loved ones, and these perspectives that only somebody who spent with people at the end of their life, could have. Because I think he helped people who were actually at the end of their life dying, not just like in a retirement home, but like people who wanted to plan their last moments, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah, a very, very, very insightful book that I
I'm
don't
gonna
have
have to
before.
add that to my list. My
You
next
add
read.
it to It's not called counting the cost. I was like, that's my Christian upbringing coming out there. It's called taking stock.
Oh, taking stock. Okay.
Yeah, taking stock. It's a personal finance book, which is why, like, I'm okay sharing it here because it doesn't detract from people. They should get your book. I'm getting your book, shoot. But this one, yeah, it looks grimy because I think it's traveled with us a bit.
Well, that means it must be pretty good.
This one it impacted me a lot. A hospice doctor's advice on financial independence, building wealth, and living a regret-free life. All right.
Oh, and Vicki Robin is a co-author on that.
How did you see that?
I
Oh,
just
because
thought
you're because you're
I'm
doing
adding
the
it to cart.
you're doing the internet things. Well, hold on. I got an affiliate link for you before you do that. The
Okay,
Amazon
okay.
affiliate link.
Send it to me.
I think it needs to. It must. So, Neil, give me a snapshot. A high and a low, if you would, please, of the 100K funnel and that business. And then help me understand, like, catch me up, what's happened since then and how you arrived to your business now, which is completely different. You mentioned something about how you felt you were giving before we hit record. You said you felt you were giving online entrepreneurs candy bars before in the marketing business, but now you're giving them the kale that they need. And the context is that I'm eating a lot more healthily now. So Neil, please.
So that business was amazing. It was very lucrative, all of that. But what I started to see were underlying symptoms of problems for why people weren't able to get the ads and the funnels and like those external things. And it really is that I think people don't know how to structure their time and their energy and all of that to be most effective. So when I saw that, to me, that I pivoted my business because I wanted to be part of more of the solution to the root problem, not the surface level symptoms that we see. And it just felt more aligned for the work that I wanted to do. I feel like the impact is bigger. Not that there's anything wrong with doing funnels and ads and all of that. Like, that's amazing. That can change an entire business in someone's life. But for me, it is that internal work. That's why I became a coach in the first place, was to help people with the internal work that just makes them more effective regardless of what it is that they're doing in their business or in their lives. And so I pivoted back to my productivity and performance stuff that I originally started my business from.
But not a pivot from failure, because I like how plenty of us take the word pivot, and it's a nice sounding word to just, you know, it means what I was doing wasn't working, and I needed to keep food on my table, so I came up with something else. Pivot, you know? But this wasn't the case for you.
Yeah, that was not the case. You're right. It was a very intentional decision to change. Like, if I could have just handed that business to somebody, I would have. I really,
I was here, Neil, I was here.
I know you can have it, right? But you're doing it and you're doing it so effectively. You don't need my input or any of my like stuff, right? So yeah, that is a fair point. I guess thank you for that. I didn't really think about it that way before. That it wasn't like a pivot because I'm starving and my business is tanking. It was like, okay, this is amazing. I actually pivoted at the height of my business, and then we can talk about what happens when you do that and the time it takes to like bring yourself back up. But yeah, it was a very intentional decision.
When you started to entertain the thoughts of making that pivot, and I say this because I can relate very personally, though I did have to pivot from my previous business, because I was forced to, and I couldn't make it work revenue-wise, from when I got stuck outside of China, and I ended up here in Mexico in the throes of the pandemic. But one thing that I had to work through was realizing that my identity was something else than the previous business that I had put my heart and soul and hours into. Maybe you don't understand 70 hours being put into a business because you did it like 25 hours a week. But, um but you were in corporate, so you did say that you worked tons in corporate. How did you go through that identity work as you kinda worked away from one business and toward
That is such a brilliant question. So let me like kick it back to you for just a second. So what was your identity when you had that original business and what did you need to shift to in order to do your current business?
well, my identity with that original business was the literally the name of the business, the elementary Chinese guy, and what that meant was I was the guy who people who lived in China looked to teach them Mandarin Chinese. It was an identity going one step deeper. Like it was a fame kind of identity because people would recognize me on the street. I got a whole story about how not to run Facebook ads if you want to actually make money, but how to run Facebook ads if you want to get famous. I was doing the famous part without lots of clients, but yeah, I went from that identity of being the famous Chinese speaking black guy to uh, well, I guess it stopped. It wasn't that I went from one to the other, like, it stopped. I had no identity, lots of crying, lots of praying, and then a different identity as I went forward.
Thank you for sharing that. I actually didn't know that about you. So that's fascinating. I didn't know. I mean, I knew you had the business, but I guess I didn't really know like the fame part and like all of that. So that's
Oh,
super interesting.
oh,
Yeah,
no.
I didn't know
Okay,
that.
hold on. You and I met because we were coaching in the same, like, high-level mastermind coaching program, right?
Yeah.
I paid to be in that program because I had a business that qualified to be in there back in, like, 2019, and so the context from all this is with the previous Chinese businesses is I was an actual paid member, and then being there, like, I remember I flew across the ocean. There were, like, 2 in-person retreats at that time because we could be in person at that time. So I flew across the ocean from China after me being up at, like, 2 AM for the coaching calls, the group coaching calls because of the time difference, to an in-person retreat and got all the cool strategy things and did things right there at the event, and my business was growing quite well after I launched, like, a group coaching offer, and that also coupled with like it was I was on the success curve going up, like starting to speak on stage, partner with like various education organizations in China that were bringing English teachers over and teaching culture and stuff like plus the fame of properly managed Facebook ads. We'll call it Hollywood B-lister fame, like I don't know, about 3 to 4 people out of 10 would like recognize me on the street. These are expats, like who aren't Chinese. And then the pandemic happened. I took a vacation to Mexico on January 13th, 2020, because our second child had been born in 2019, and me and my wife were kind of into language and crazy like this. So she would only speak Spanish to our kids, and I would only speak Mandarin Chinese to our kids. I still speak Mandarin Chinese to them. And I was like, I want to get in on this Spanish thing. Let's go, because business is going successful. And what do you do? Well, you use some of that money for your dreams. And one of mine was language for Spanish. And so I was like, let's go to Mexico at this time of year in January where things slow down anyway, for my clientele at least, and let's enroll in like a Spanish immersion program for me. And my wife was like, sure, let's do it. And so we did it. And then we start hearing about this virus. And then people at the language school start looking at us sideways, like, hey, did you say you're from China? And we're like, we've been out 14 days. That's what the news says. We're good. But people are like looking at us. Yeah, totally. And the school's like starting to shut down then because, I mean, can you remember? Like, nobody really knew what was happening. Like, we only were hearing about stuff, but seeing stuff. And then, like, this thing is hopping to the state of Washington now. And and so like in this context, we're hearing like what's going on in the news in the States because we're in Mexico, but then we're also seeing all the Instagram stories of our friends who are still in China, and they're like in quarantine. Like can leave one family member can leave like their house per week to the grocery store, and sometimes not even that. Sometimes the gate guards would just bring you like food, and you were stuck in your apartment. Like from there to like the mandatory like nose brain swabbing like every week. We were like, we're not going to go to China right now. We're going to stay in Mexico because it's quarantine, but there's still like the juice guy on the street with like tacos and guac, like within a walking distance. Like it's good. And then China's borders shut down. And then we were like, we'll wait it out longer in Mexico. And then the borders never opened again. But we still had to like navigate, well, we're renting. So then we had to get rid of a 4-bedroom apartment worth of stuff. And then we had to shut down my incorporated business that was in China because we weren't there to be able to renew paperwork. And you can't do that overseas. And it's about that time when I remember we left Mexico because we only had a tourist visa. And I'm like in my in-laws' house, who they're quite successful and they have a very big basement, and they were never pro us living in China for 12 years anyway. And so like I'm everything that I've been working toward stopped, halted, like could not get back to pursuing it. And I am just like in my parents' basement, like praying every morning because I'm a Christian. So it's like I'm just like, Jesus help me. Like nothing fancy, no quoting scripture. It's like our savings is pretty much gone. I can't do this. I got nothing else. And that's when I had called up Rick and I'm like, can you give me a job? And he's like, come coach inside of this program because you know about ads, you've run an online business. And then I met you like a year later. And that is as short as I can make a story like that.
I just knew snippets of that because Rick and I had had a conversation about you, and he had talked about like the struggles that you had had, but I didn't know like that full backstory. So that is fascinating.
Yeah, crazy. I know about having to transition identity, which is why I asked you about what it was like when you went from one business to another.
It's interesting. I think that's a fascinating question. I think honestly, we could probably do an entire podcast episode or masterclass on this idea that we get our identities interwoven with our business, not just with our business, but achieving certain results or metrics inside of our business. So I definitely have in the past, and when I started, my identity was clearly wrapped up in being successful. And when that all changed for me when I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disorders. There was a fundamental identity shift that happened because I had seen myself as a healthy person. And it was like that was shattered. So basically, all my identity was kind of like shattered at that time. And what was really cool, one of the gifts, just like everything you can see as a blessing or a curse, I see my diseases really as a blessing in a lot of ways. I was able to really redecide what my identity was. And that's when I completely untangled my identity from my business. Like it just is, there isn't this connection anymore. And I will have to tell you, like, that is liberating, honestly. Like, my business could close tomorrow. I'm like, I would have a fantastic life. I'm whole as a human. Everything's good. It's totally fine. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I get that though, because I have been there myself with that identity. Yeah.
Walk us through this, if you can, a timeline. What was it? How much time passed from the peak of your previous business and then the diagnoses that you had and then the ideas for your next business?
So I would say we're within about 18 months of all of that kind of unfolding. I once I got diagnosed, like I said, it was like my world kind of just shattered for a while and I was really ineffective. I wasn't making decisions. I was just kind of just like being, like trying to figure out like how do I get myself healthy? How like what does this look like? So there was probably 3 to 6 months of figuring that out. And then once I was kind of through that phase, like I was on a path to health, then it was like, okay, what do I want to use this business for? And that's where I decided like I actually want to use it to make an impact, deeper impacts in terms of like some of that internal work, really helping people be as effective as they want in their lives and their businesses. And so then I was like, well, a pivot is challenging, right? Because all the content you have in your background is not necessarily aligned. And so I was like, okay, what's a quick way for me to reposition myself? And that's when I decided I'm going to write a book. And so then I did the book, and now we have the book funnel launch. So all of that's been about, I would say, 6 to 9 months, maybe. So it's not necessarily like a quick process. It definitely wasn't overnight, at least not for me.
So, having shared about your book, when you started growing your second business, what changed from how you grew your first one?
I would say I've really focused more on, let me see if I can make this make sense, focus more on relationships versus volume. So, really trying to put out content like a book. The idea behind a book is someone who reads a book is probably a different person than someone who just downloads a freebie. Not always, but generally, if you think about if you read a book, the person who's integrating the ideas from a book, like that came from whoever, whatever author that is, I don't care who you are, that is the culmination of that person's experiences, learning, thought processes over a long period of time, right? So there's a different level of impact, I think, that happens in something like that. So everything that I'm doing with my marketing, everything we're doing in terms of bringing people into our world is really done at a deeper relational level rather than volume. We're not trying to like turn out a lot of volume necessarily. We're really trying to create impactful conversations with people that make a difference.
That answers my question. I also want to know, like, did the size of your team change?
Not really. I mean, one thing that was different was when I had those other programs running, I had hired a lot of contract coaches to help out in the fulfillment. And so we let all of those folks go. But as far as the team goes, really it's me and Kelly, and then we do have one VA who also works part time. But that's it. It what really happened on the back end was us figuring out how to organize our business in a way that was really easy for us to execute, using AI, because AI came out right along as I was doing this transition, this pivot. We really dove deep into that, integrated AI into our business, made things so much easier. Yeah, and setting up workflows and those kinds of things. So it was just our opportunity to take the resources we had, and this is what we do as entrepreneurs, right? We're so resourceful. We take the resources we have and we just make them work better for us, was really our whole purpose.
I just got like this weird, almost like goosebump, surreal moment when you said when AI came out, and like a thought came into my mind, like, holy crap, I've lived through like two major game changing things. Cause like I can remember before we had internet, and I can Well, of course, remember before we had AI, because like it's been both have been such an impact and a change for how we do things. At least like I feel like maybe we're in a small bubble right now, like as online business owners who use AI like profusely. But yeah, I don't know. I have those moments like, whoa.
I know, isn't it kind of cool to look back and like see like the way things used to be, and now I feel like we're in this like wild west of opportunity. Like there's so much that's available to us now that wasn't available to us 2 years ago, and it's really fun and exciting.
That's good perspective. I'm gonna have to tell myself that. We are in the wild west of opportunity. If I missed out on certain things, right as the internet was like first becoming a thing, look for those things with that same lens now with AI. There we go. All right. I'm gonna find the next Facebook and put some money down. Oh, true story.
I can't wait to hear about it.
No, it's just random things like when Facebook was still invite only and you had to have a college email and whatever. I did invest a good amount of money, and then it went down and then it went back up and I sold. It's like, all right, I made a little bit. And I was like, dang, I should have held on for another 12 years. That would have been brilliant. So, can you leave us with a snapshot of this second business? The hardest thing that has been about building it, and then the biggest like moment of success that you've had so far.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is just creating content that then is going to attract the right people in, right? Because you have a certain audience that you follow, and you can probably speak to this, right? Even with your transition of the podcast and all that, like there's certain people who are attracted to that, and then you make a change as a business owner, and then there is like new people you need to attract into your world. And so being patient with that process, number one, I think has been challenging. But it's also been fun because it's allowed me to take my own skill level and take it to the next level. Like I have an acquisition funnel now. It's something I've always wanted to have. That's a different level of funnel than the funnel that I was running before, but super fun. And I think overall it's like letting the process naturally unfold. Like I'm sewing a lot, sewing. I'm gonna be sewing for probably another year, and letting like trusting in the process that there will be a time where I get to reap the benefits from that sewing. But the patience to continue along, even when you're not reaping the benefits yet.
Okay, all right. High point?
High point is I just love the work that I'm doing. I love helping my clients in the ways that we are helping them. I think it is really impactful. I think it is long lasting. These are things that they're going to take with them into their lives, whether it be in business, whether it be in parenting, or their own personal development. So for me, that is really, it feels juicy and aligned. And I have to tell you, it's different running a business when you feel really aligned with what you're doing. And I'm thinking more in terms of vocation than career than I ever have in my life. And it's a really liberating way to run a business. So that's been the high point for me.
What's the name of your business? And if somebody wants to find out more about it, do they just go to neillwilliams.com?
Yeah, so that you can just go to neillwilliams.com. I think grabbing the book, if you don't know me, might be the best first introduction to do that. If you do know me and you want to take that work a little bit deeper, we have a couple of other programs that we could do to help you with that.
What I can clearly say to like you who's listening right now and hasn't known Neill is like one, she's phenomenal because I've sat in on so many sessions where she's coached other like online business owners like as a master coach, not just a certified coach, but you're a certified master coach, or no, a master certified coach, which I remember asking you that throughout the process of getting to know you over the past couple of years. And you're like, oh, no, that's a whole nother separate process over getting the certification.